Well, hey, it's Dan Bisig here at College and Beyond, and I am more than excited to have this opportunity to interview. Uh, well, in person, it's a little special to me. Is my nephew, Caleb Bisig, who is going to tell us a little bit today about his experience with aeronautical and aerospace engineering. So, Caleb, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for interviewing me.
Yeah,
It's good
buddy,
to see you.
great to see you too. So, why don't you do this? Tell us a little bit about how you decided to major in aeronautical and aerospace engineering in the first place.
Well, so I had a whole bunch of childhood influences. My great grandparents actually were pilots, which is terrifying because they flew until they were in their 80s. But on top of that, I had a couple of really great teachers who really pushed me towards that engineering and math focus. Um, little things like going to space camp in the fifth grade. And I always knew that I wanted to be an inventor. I never really knew what that meant until I was in about high school and we really got into what engineering was. And I had a few courses that I was able to take that taught me CAD and a little bit of programming, G code for mills, things like that. So really good experiences throughout school that kind of pushed me in that direction.
So, when you were in high school, your senior year and everything else like that, what colleges did you consider going to then?
I was looking at a few that were they were still kind of local, but really well-ranked schools. So I was looking at the University of Cincinnati as the closest and best for co-ops and work and things like that. I looked at Case Western, Purdue, and Rose-Hulman as other very serious options. So, and I ended up applying to Case Western and Purdue and UC and was accepted to all three. But the University of Cincinnati's co-op program was what drew me in.
Oh, really? So that's really what caught your attention, huh?
Right, right.
Yeah, and tell me why that is. Why is that such a big deal for anybody who doesn't understand that?
Sure. So the University of Cincinnati was actually, I believe, the first school to have a co-op program. And what that means is that you're working with a company as a requirement for your degree. You have to spend, it's a 5-year program for engineering with the university, but it adds 5 semesters of co-op, and that includes courses that teach you interview skills. They teach you how to apply for different companies, what you should be looking for, the kinds of things that you should know about them. They have connections and partnerships with these companies already. So you are almost looking at a list of jobs that are already preset for the university students to be able to jump on board with. And the university is very good about helping you out with that. The other universities that I looked at, Purdue kind of mentioned it, but they weren't too keen on the idea. I think Case Western might have mentioned something about it, but I wanted something that felt like they were trying to connect me with the next stage after my education, not just making me a good engineer now, but helping me to get to a new job in the future.
So that whole co-op is really an integral part of the engineering program, or really other programs even at UC, isn't it?
It is. It is. Not just in the engineering groups, but I know that there are art co-ops as well that they do. I've had friends that have worked for Apple interning as artists, graphic design and things. Mm-hmm. And I know that, generally medical programs already have systems in place like that. So it might not apply as much to those, but there are a lot within the University of Cincinnati specifically and other schools that will help you to get jobs while you're in school, make those connections.
Well, it's just nice though that it's actually something that they're very involved with versus it being forced on you to try to figure it out,
Sure. Yeah. Having classes with a dedicated professor who, like in our case, was an engineer who's trying to help you get those jobs, knows what people are looking for in the industry. It's really helpful when you're kind of sitting there as a student going, what's it actually going to be like out in the real world? So
yeah, because he's actually done it or she's done it, right?
Right.
So as I understand it, you got your undergraduate degree from the University of Cincinnati, but then tell us about what you decided to do after that.
Sure. So at first, I wanted to get out into the industry, get a few years experience, and then return for my master's. I had worked in manufacturing for all of my co-ops, and while that was great, there wasn't a lot of freedom with it creatively. I wanted to be able to do things that were more on the design end, and that tends to lean more towards being a researcher. So I was looking into some of the different programs that were offered by the university as I was leaving, and none of them were particularly interesting to me until one of our professors, Dr. Kelly Cohen, who was actually the interim department head at the time, brought up the fact that we were starting a brand new Master of Engineering course that combined aerospace engineering and robotics. And I'd already been taking a few kind of robotics and machine learning oriented courses as technical electives, So that really caught my attention, and I ran up to him after the fact. And we had a pretty good working relationship over a few presentations that I had given under him. So he was okay with pushing me through to that program right away, which was really nice. And then while I was looking into that program, I reached out to a professor who was just starting at the university in the astrodynamics side of things. And that was Dr. Amah, who actually happened to be from Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'm in the middle of Albuquerque, New Mexico right now. So I was asking him if there was a way that I could help out in his lab space over that summer, just to try and hit the ground running, because I really didn't know much about robotics, even though I had taken a few courses. And he ran through all of the different things that would be expected of me, the things that I should be looking to target as a master's student. And after a few months of working with him, I actually lucked into, because it was a brand new lab space, he was just trying to get started, being able to switch over to a Master of Science following the same type of track. So a little more creative of a curriculum. We kind of designed it out so that I could study aerospace with a robotics twist as a Master of Science student at the university. So we got to develop a brand new lab. I got to travel to different conferences, events, talk to different businesses that we were trying to develop projects with. So it was a really great experience.
Well, and I know that really helped you then when you were ultimately looking for your future job, right?
Right. And so it was actually Dr. Ma's connections out here in New Mexico that informed him about the Air Force Research Laboratory internship opportunities out here. So he encouraged me to apply. I managed to get accepted and was in for the summer of 2019. I was actually accepted in 2020 as well, but due to the pandemic and a focus on my thesis work at the time, I withdrew from that one and then was able to come back in 2021. And so this past summer, I was able to finish that internship pretty well under the same advisor that I had the last time. It took about a month after the fact that I was able to come on board as a contractor. So now I work for the Air Force Research Laboratory under Blue Halo. It used to be ATA, but they are a contract group that pushes employees into the government facilities for research work.
Wow. So what an interesting transition then for you.
Yeah.
And I know there are obviously certain things that you're working on that you cannot talk about.
Right.
Yeah. But is there anything that, I mean, can you give us some glimpse into what you're doing now as far as the kind of work?
Sure. So, I mean, the laboratories out here are more space vehicle oriented. So satellite work, imaging, telescopes, things like that. My work is more of an extension. I mean, my summer work was related to what I was working on with my thesis, which is kind of a bit more of a machine learning twist on the whole thing. So one of the things that's kind of funny about aerospace is because everything is so exact, they are not fans of machine learning being applied to things. And so trying to figure out how the verification is going to go for that, trying to figure out how you can develop a controller that's trustworthy and safe. Those are big focuses in aerospace right now as a whole, not even just here. So I'm interested to get more involved in that realm as I move forward here.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So, hey, tell us this. What do you love most about your current job?
Sure. I really like, so I mentioned the creative aspect of it, being able to be given a project that's a bit more open-ended, being able to pursue different avenues with that, looking into different research papers, presenting what I'm finding and coming up with my own creative approaches that nobody might, or people might not have applied before, but they definitely haven't applied to this specific problem. So being able to just kind of look at it as an engineering sandbox.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. What do you like the least about it? If there is anything at this point, because I know you've only been doing it for a short period of time, but still.
Well, so research is a bit different than manufacturing in the sense that you are much more independent. So you're already working on your own, which is fine. The facilities might be a bit less stacked than what you're used to. So if you're not as used to the isolation of it, that might hit a little bit harder. I did have to move all the way out here to New Mexico, which is beautiful landscape, but the city, I'm not a huge fan of Albuquerque. It's okay. It's nothing like Cincinnati back home, where it's like a nice, clean, skyscraper-filled city. This is a very desert town for sure. So the social aspect of it is a little bit different than if I was working in a big city back home.
Yeah, but obviously I have to assume that the kind of work that you're doing probably would not be done in a city like what we're in, would it?
Well, close by anyway, because the other AFRL location is in Dayton.
Oh, really?
So Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Yeah. So if I was ever to leave this work and work similarly, it would probably be moving back to Dayton.
How about, I
So
had
believe
no
it or
idea.
not, yeah, pretty close by.
Yeah, so right up at Wright-Patterson, I guess.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes on up at Wright-Patterson that people don't know about. Isn't that
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah, I think so. The big areas for AFRL are Dayton, here in Albuquerque. I think there's one in Hawaii that does observational work. And there's a few in, I believe, Arizona, some other areas. The major Air Force Research Laboratory bases also have AFRL Summer Scholar programs for internships. So,
Wow. Yeah, very, very interesting. So if you could change anything about your job, or for that matter, your educational path, what would you change? Or would you?
I don't know that there's anything that I would change about my job as far as educational path. So one of the things that I was looking into was the international co-op program at the University of Cincinnati. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to take the job that I wanted because the university was not keen on me taking over from another student who was in an unpaid internship. They didn't want us to give Germany the idea that UC students were free labor. So
Oh, yeah.
they canceled my ability to join in on a project that another student was leaving from, but that would have been with DLR, which was like Germany's NASA. So I think if I had spent less focus on my German culture studies at the time, I could have focused a little bit more on a few of my other classes that might have been a bit more interesting. But none of them were related to the work that I do today. So I don't see that as super important in how I ended up here. I think there was a little bit more, at the time we were lacking a professor that could teach astrodynamics until the professor that I had for my master's came along. Having a little bit more background in the space physics side of thing might have helped a little bit more with the work that I'm doing right now, but that would have been about it.
And without a doubt, what was your favorite subject then that you took, or your favorite professor? What was it? What was that topic?
Sure. I liked some of the structural classes, statics and dynamics, things like that. But I also really liked some of the programming and machine oriented courses. So when we were able to take technical electives, being able to jump in on ones that were talking about intelligent robotics, that was always my focus. So taking aerospace as a robotics kind of a system, you're looking at things like how can I develop controllers for, I mean, in my thesis, it was groups of quadcopters working together, or complex reactionary behaviors in satellites, things like that. So there's a lot that can be done with controllers that turns aerospace work into robotics work, but you just have to look at it the right way.
Well, and I know we've had a lot of great conversations about all that kind of stuff as far as what you've been doing. It's amazing the way that the technology has evolved over the years,
Absolutely.
and shrunk at the same time. I mean, that's the other
Right.
part of it, right? Yeah. So if you had to do it all over again, would you still go to the same college, pursue the same major, and go to work for the same employer that you're with right now?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was all really beneficial in stacking to this point. Everything was just kind of a stepping stone. And so to that end, I would say like it's definitely important that you network, that you find people within the university that you go to, no matter where it is, because I went to the University of Cincinnati, which is pretty middle of the road for aerospace. As long as you're looking for people who are interested in reaching those fields that you're looking at, you can find a place to fit in.
And Caleb, I guess you'd probably be the first one to say, though, even though you said UC is kind of middle of the road, you didn't get any worse in education by going there than if you had gone to MIT or any place else like that, did you?
Well, I don't know about MIT, but I know that on the average, there were other aerospace students that we talked to through our co-op programs, and they were telling us that they were taking very, very similar classes, getting basically identical assignments to us. I know students, even here at AFRL, there have been a couple of high schoolers that are looking into colleges right now, and some of them have done full analysis of different colleges on a cost versus career salary after the fact. And there's no distinguishable correlation that they found anyway when they were looking at this between the cost of the college you go to and the type of career success you have after the fact. The one exception that I'll say to this is that others have informed me the final tier of college that you get to determines what level of teaching you can do in colleges after the fact. So a college's ranking, if you were looking at getting a PhD, would determine what schools you are able to teach at with that PhD. But that'd be about it.
Yeah. Do you have any interest in continuing to pursue your education further?
I do. I do. I want to get a few years of actual experience here first. And as a researcher, that means being able to get a few papers published, being able to attend conferences. I've already done a few of both, but being able to get into a journal would be a big one that I still need to do. And those help build the resume moving forward to look great to an upcoming professor who might be able to sponsor you through a PhD, or a company that might hire you on and then want to add to your experience that way. And as I've heard it, you really don't ever want to be footing the bill for your PhD. There's always somebody who's willing to pay.
Oh man, that's fantastic news, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, if you've got that ability. So, how do you think the future looks for being an aerospace and aeronautical engineer?
Oh yeah, well, it's great right now. You've got all these private corporations that are fighting over basically a new space race. There's still older industries like AFRL and NASA who are working on these new plans for, I think in the coming years, they're going to have to retire the International Space Station. And there's the Gateway project that wants to put up new space stations around not only Earth, but the moon, and look into lunar bases and move forward towards Mars. So there are a huge number of projects on the horizon and a lot of companies that are throwing money at this right now. So it's a great time to be an aerospace engineer.
Yeah, plus you got what, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos that are also going after it too, aren't they?
Right, right. So depending on how you feel about the billionaire space race, there's that going on as well. So you can
Yeah,
always just hitch a ride with these other guys that are throwing money at it.
yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, it's very interesting though that because there are those funds there, that it's opened up more opportunities, like you said. In
Right.
fact, I was watching something the other day. They were talking about the space station. I guess it's supposed to be crashed back into the ocean in 2030, is what I heard.
Mhm.
So,
That sounds about right.
yeah, pretty amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And these things all have a lifespan to them. It's funny. I've had people asking me before, like, you're just going to crash the space station? Well, yeah. I mean, that's the most economical way of getting it back down.
right, yeah, burn it up in the atmosphere so all that
Right.
technology doesn't get picked up by somebody who shouldn't have it, right?
Well,
Yeah,
it's more a matter of making sure that it doesn't stay up there crashing into things once we leave it alone.
yeah.
So,
That,
yeah.
by the way, that's a whole nother story, man. I'd love your take on how the heck you deal with all the space junk that's floating around up there, but
Oh, yeah.
maybe we can make $1 gazillion coming up with that idea, right?
I
Yeah,
know there's a lot of interest.
I bet there is. So let me ask this final question then. What final advice would you give to any student who is considering going into a similar profession or even a degree program in college?
It's not critical to know exactly what you want to do right away when you get into your college, but within probably a year or two, you should be starting to look at what specialization within that field you want to have. So I'm not talking about choosing between mechanical engineer or aerospace engineer. That should be something that you should probably have figured out within your first year in school. But as you move through your program, you really need to start looking at the specializations of your skill, because aerospace, for example, you can have jet engine design, but that breaks down further into airflow and mechanics. There's material properties that you have to consider, safety cycles. So one particular part of an aircraft can have multiple different subcomponents that each have an entirely different group of skill sets that they're involved in. And so for me, working in like machine learning, for example, that's an entirely different branch of aerospace engineering than somebody who's working on fluids. So being able to figure out what you want very early on and start to find professors that are interested in those topics, that paves the way for your next step.
Well, that's really good advice because truly that network of people, those mentors that you have really can control the future direction as far as where you're going, can it?
Sure, sure. I mean, the class that I had with Dr. Cohen was insignificant in the project that we were doing at the time. We had the class itself was fantastic. It was on systems engineering, but the project we had was optimizing a little flapping flyer quadcopters that you wind up a rubber band on. And so, it was just a fun thought project, but he suggested that with the results that I and my partner got on that project at the time, that we present our work in Dayton at their Engineering and Sciences Symposium. And that stepping stone of being able to prove that I could do presentations and research work was what helped me to get into my master's program. So it's these little connections that you don't see along the way that stack up with individuals that you've made the connection with.
Caleb, I can't thank you enough for taking this time to talk with me today. I know this is going to be really valuable for any students that I'm working with that are looking at aerospace engineering. And
Well,
thank you
thank
very
you.
much for doing this interview. I really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you again when we get you back home, in
Sure,
the
sure.
future here.